The next item on the agenda is a progress report from Florida Polytechnic University. On February 20th, I sent a letter to Florida Polytechnic University Board of Trustees Chair Rob Goodell, asking him to provide a report to our board. Specifically, I asked for a report on the progress that Florida Poly is making toward benchmarks established in the legislation that established the universities. These benchmarks include expectations regarding accreditation, academic programming, staffing, student enrollment, and facilities. I have spoken to Chair Goodell and met with him personally about this request. And Interim Chair, Chief Operating Officer Ava Park and her staff have met with the Chancellor Brogan to discuss this request. I've also spoken to Ms. Parker about the report, and I know Governor Hussaini has also been speaking with them, and he chairs the ad hoc committee. Before we get into this, do you have anything you would like to say?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the committee that you have set up that includes myself, Norm Tripp, and Dick Baird, our job is to oversee the transfer of Polytech as part of USF to Polytech, Florida Polytech. That was one of our jobs. The second part of our job was to oversee the implementation of SB 1994, which was signed by the governor on April 20, 2012. In that bill, there are certain number of items that our committee follow up with those, and we want to make sure as we progress through this, be able to the implementation, be able to work with the board of Polytech, which is half of those appointees are from our board and half by the governor. And I will honestly tell you that this is one of our best boards, one of the best boards we have. We have a lot of trust on them, and more specifically on Mr. Goodell as their chair. Sometimes he talks so fast, he goes way over my head. But I have to tell you, he has put his heart and soul into this, and he's giving so much time. And if City of Florida had to pay him for all of this, probably we would have gone bankrupt. They've done a great job, and our job is, three of us here in reporting back to you, is that on ongoing basis, we'll be working with them. One question I have from the CEO, I think it's a very important question from Ms. Parker, that one of our own. The colors you are wearing, are those Polytechnic colors? Ms. Parker, just for our information for our board.
Governor Hussaini, I work really hard. I mean, I wake up and I go to bed thinking about Florida Poly. So the least I could do is make a recommendation on interim colors for the university. So that's the one fun thing I can say I've been able to do as a part of my interim responsibilities. So like I said, the interim colors are purple and silver.
That's what I thought. I don't see any purple on your chairman, but that's okay, maybe.
It's in his heart. It's in his heart.
Maybe next time. So with that, Mr. Chairman, welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for all your hard work. And turn back to you. Okay.
Ava, you're going to lead off with this presentation.
Yes, I was just going to bring up the chair and take an opportunity to introduce the members of our Board of Trustees who are here, and then Chair Goodell is going to go from there, Mr. Chairman, if you're okay with that. I think I said earlier in this meeting that one of the best things I ever could have done was serve on the Board of Governors, and I do miss it. I guess the second best thing I could ever do is have an opportunity to work with Florida Polytechnic University. It's a great opportunity to work with a board that has a vision, and it's something to see, and something that hasn't been done in our state for some time, that we have a university to actually develop without a partner or sister institution taking the lead. So I'm pleased today to, of course, introduce our chair, Chair Goodell, but also I'd like to recognize some of our members of our board who are here. We have Don Wilson, who is here with us, and Don is a lawyer in Polk County. Don, if you stand up. And we have Dick Hallion, who's with us here from Okaloosa County. And one of our own, Frank Martin, who has been a part of the Board of Governors for some time, is also agreeing to serve as one of our members of our Board of Trustees. Bob Stork, who was here earlier, is now over at the legislature working with us, with our senators. And I'm happy also to say that our Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Darkazali, is also here with us today. So welcome to the Board of Governors, and Chair Goodell, it's all up to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm with Ava. Among the many things that I've had the pleasure of saying that showed up in the newspaper, one of the finest moments was when I commented that, it took me almost 6 weeks to convince Ava to join me, and it took me longer to convince my wife. It took me less time to convince my wife to marry me. My son pointed out, because he saw that quote first, he said, "Dad, you've got about 15 minutes to save yourself." Today we are going to present an update pursuant to your request. But before I do that, I want to reintroduce the members of the board, because quite honestly, this is a very unique group of people. In a world that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes that is changing faster than any of us can recognize. Our board is comprised of people in the cybersecurity business, telecommunications, capital markets, aerospace, as well as the media business, all of which are major components in the Florida economy. This is the first chance that people like us have to be able to play a measurable role in how education will be delivered and defined in what we think is going to be an incredibly changing world that we're all going to have to adjust to. Before I get into the response, I want to ask your indulgence for me to talk to the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is sitting there with a sign on it that says, "Why do we need the Polytechnic?" So I'm going to take a few moments and talk about that. First of all, what this group did was decide on a vision that they could call their own. There we go. Quite honestly, this group of esteemed business people felt it necessary to define our own vision as to somebody else's, because quite frankly, all of us being CEOs find it difficult to execute somebody else's business model. And so we endeavored to do as quickly as we could to define an idea, move it to the execution phase, because quite honestly, any great idea has to be executed. One of my favorite quotes that follow me all around the world as I go is that, from Thomas Edison, who said, "Vision without execution is hallucination." And so as a consequence, what this board did is we took a serious look over the course of the last 3 or 4 months, not just on what our vision might be, but how we were going to execute it. My background, ladies and gentlemen, is in the capital markets. I have been involved in investing, formulating capital for private equity firms and institutions my entire career. I've been blessed over the last 20 years to be able to travel the globe and invest my own capital, my partner's capital, in many different kinds of businesses. I continue to do that. About 75% of what I do is overseas. And as a consequence, I'm going to take a few moments and share with you what my world looks like. So what you'll have in front of you is a sphere of what I think are the 4 major trends that are affecting not only our businesses, our country, our industries, but our own workforce. And these are the kind of trends that I think are not only astounding and are changing how we view not only how we do business and how we succeed, but how we're going to have to position our workforce in what is becoming a globally flat business world. If you look around this circle, you'll see that both probably the most profound change is technological advance. We look at speed and storage. 25% of the data in the world less than 10 years ago was digitized. Now 93% is digitized. For those in the medical field, the human genome, it took them a decade to pair up the 3 billion potential pairs into a computer simulation model. You can do that in a day. The amount of big data that's available to crunch numbers and change basically how we calculate predictivity on the businesses that we're all involved in is changing so rapidly that you're now beginning to see major R&D investment across all businesses and accumulate and analyze big data. This is going to begin to change the nature of all industries. We look at manufacturing across the world, and now we have the ability for machines to talk to machines, and the ability to actually repatriate, in my view, manufacturing back into this country, just simply because the costs have been driven so low. It costs $6 a square foot to manufacture a product in China, and we lost a lot of business overseas. Robotics and advances in nanotechnology have allowed us to not only make computers and technology so affordable that we can do the same thing back in the United States for $3 a square foot. This is profound. And this is going to enable all of us in the industry to begin to think differently about how we not only produce goods and services around the world, but who we sell them to. One of my favorite stories is about a year ago, we took a company public in Brazil, and I happened to stop in Manaus on the way home, and if any of you have ever visited Manaus, it's at the merger of the Negro River and the Amazon. Manaus is home to 2 million people. The only way they can get there and get out of there is by a 1,000-mile boat ride or an airplane. What exists there is one of the largest import-export trade facilities in South America. And what was interesting to me as I was going through the city, there was a wall poster, and it was a picture of a lady on a cell phone. And the advertisement was 3G available for 29 reais a month. That's about $15. 4G coming in the middle of the Amazon. The whole concept of proliferation of social media and connectivity is not only changing how we communicate with each other, but how we communicate around the globe. Consumers and emerging market companies have been so affected by health advances that today we would speculate on how many consumers might be available in some of our businesses in these emerging markets. And with 1.8 billion new consumers available to buy everything from basic supplies to communications equipment, the world is a completely different universe than we even thought about a short time ago. Ladies and gentlemen, everything on that chart did not exist 10 years ago. So I can tell you that as my job, the way it was described to me when I took on this path a number of years ago, was that my job was to be Wayne Gretzky, one of the greatest hockey players that ever played. And those of you who follow Gretzky, he was asked, why you were such a good hockey player. And he said, my job is to go where the puck is going, not where it's been. Ladies and gentlemen, I suggest you take that home and fill that out for where you think industry in the world and those trends are going to take us 10 years from now. The challenge for all of us is going to be to, particularly in the state of Florida, how we future-proof our economy. I spend a great deal of time investing in all across Florida industries, and I can tell you that there are great competitive advantages that Florida has. We're already very well embedded in many of the growth industries, particularly technology and innovation, that will have an impact on gross state product and the well-being of all of our citizens. But I also tell you that I invest in Massachusetts and California and Oregon and Washington, where they're far ahead of us. They've made far more investments in technology and innovative science and technology that have already put their states on an attitude of growth that Florida needs to imitate. The industries that we look at in terms of where the capital is going to flow and management and innovation are those things that all of us are fairly familiar with. But the issue is going to be that every single day that we come to work, these trends are going to begin to affect us. And it's been very assuring to me that we've got an administration, we've got a legislature that now begins to focus all of the resources that we have on building those innovative parts of our economy. We've got an economic development unit that's begun to marshal all resources across the educational spectrum, industry, government, to do what we need to do to transform the economy of Florida and make sure that it's competitive as these changes occur. But in order to do that, we're going to need educated labor, and we're going to need skilled labor and industry involvement in order to make that work. And I think that focus is important. I think that the things that most interest me as a participant or a spectator in the educational arena is how important STEM is across innovation. You go back in any period of time, that 85% of economic growth comes out of companies that we call innovative, and most of those involve STEM. But STEM crosses a complete spectrum of education. It's not just at the theoretical level, where all the research universities work hard at what I call focusing on why is there air, which is really, really important. And those at the bottom, making sure that our skilled labor force can implement and do what we need to do relative to manufacturing and all the STEM fields that are important to business. But what falls in between here is to someone in the business world the most important part of education. I'll tell you that when I graduated from the University of Florida, I was very proud of the fact that I was able to use the two skills that I acquired to advance what I thought was an acquisition of my most important asset. When I came out of Florida, I knew the difference between a Manet and a Monet, which enabled me to talk my wife into marrying me. However, my ability to apply a Monte Carlo simulation has kept her married to me for 37 years. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most important component of where industry and education come together to make a difference. And it's not that the Polytechnic is the solution for this, it's as a solution to this. Everyone in this room is involved in making sure that applied STEM technology and innovation works together with industry in order to make the products or the research that we develop in STEM become reality in terms of products. It's not enough to just teach STEM. It's got to be used. And I think from the next slide, I think you'll find that from my perspective in business, what is lacking in Florida and lacking in a lot of states that have not been able to take advantage of their growth potential is that you can teach someone the basics, fundamentals of STEM. The language of STEM is mathematics. Engineering is becoming a like language. But the ability to coordinate and collaborate across an educational spectrum, the element of management, in other words, what do you do with this? How does it turn into products? How do companies exist? How do they die? How do they grow? How do products evolve? Is critical today as a part of innovation. Without that component of teaching these kids, and not just kids, but those that go back to learn more, we're seeing more and more people around the globe with either online education or either going back to STEM-oriented institutions to understand how management, how important management is to the use of what their skill is, and vice versa. We're finding MBA students going back and taking online courses in engineering because engineering is the heartbeat of, is the foundation for technology. And technology, particularly communications and computer technology, is running across everything. It's running across manufacturing, it's running across food processing, it's running across every industry, not only around the world, but around Florida. As a consequence, it's important that we educate our potential skilled workers on how that works. Everything is becoming interconnected. You can see it, what we did as a consequence of trying to understand how we would build the Polytechnic. The first challenge that we had was coming to grips with building a model. And there are three basic models that we found across the universe of STEM institutions, those that were substantially STEM-oriented and those that produce a great deal of STEM graduates. For example, in the elite undergraduate institution category, you'll find the University of Florida. In the global research, you'll find Caltech. Over in the industry engaged institution, you'll find Arizona State and a number of other ones. We studied those models. We wanted to understand why they decided on those models and how they delivered them. We then took a look, we drilled down one more level and understood where their funding came from, what they were teaching, where their professors came from, who were their students, and what did those students demand. And then we turned around and evaluated what industry thought of those institutions as basically skilled workers. Because I think it's critical at the end to understand your output. This is a group of institutions that we looked at. On the left side of the 35 institutions that are fundamentally STEM, which means they're more than 50% of their students majoring in STEM. And we also looked at the 17 institutions, who produce a significant amount of STEM graduates. We looked hard at why they came up with those models And then ultimately, which was most important to us, is how those universities were integrated into the business community and industry involvement. And ultimately, we felt, when we chose, that we felt that the Polytechnic's best model is industry engaged. Basically, because that's basically our point of view as industry people, and at the same time, we felt it was the most effective model that we can implement. Along this spectrum, an integral part of building this university will be not only tangential involvement with industry, but we believe that it's critical all the way through the educational curriculum, all the way through the educational delivery. Students, in order to be effective, skilled workers, are going to have to know how things are made. And as much as we'd like to be able to do ceramic pottery online, the same thing if you're dealing with laser technology or laser manufacturing, the bottom line is that the kids are going to have to touch it. And so we looked at the universities that actually took the STEM, used an application model, and how they actually did that, what it cost, who was mentoring it, and who was delivering that educational experience for the kids. And then the last thing that we did is we took a very strong look on this matrix. We took all the things that we really felt were important objectives of the university, all the way from student demand to employer demand to cost to competition, the wonderful work you're doing on the Access and Attainment Commission. We looked at the curriculum being deployed by every other university in the state, as well as many of the polytechnics and STEM-oriented universities around the country and around our region. And that's how we came to the conclusion as to the two colleges that we formed and how we were going to deploy our educational experience. I think in a quick conclusion, we developed a vision for this polytechnic that we don't think is unusual. I think as a matter of fact, when you look around the country, every major state in the United States that has major research institutions also have at least one polytechnic. The concept has been worked on over many years, but it's probably more important today than it ever has been. Personally, I would love to see this model integrated into every university in the state system. But on the other hand, we have a unique opportunity to create something from the beginning, a culture of delivery, a culture of mentoring, a culture of integration with industry that is very hard to do among existing institutions. And as a consequence, from our standpoint, we not only believe that there are plenty of students in the state that we attracted to this model, we also think there'll be plenty of academic advisors and faculty, as well as our relationships with industry. Because at the end of the day, this is the product that industry wants and needs to remain competitive in the Florida economy. I think we can make a difference. We've worked hard at this. I think this board has taken the necessary time to think through not only the vision and retest it, but understand whether it can be executed. And as a consequence, from my standpoint, we have a choice in this state. Going back to the earlier slides, the state can either choose to play against what the competition is going to be, or you can choose not to play. And I choose play. Now, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to take a minute and talk about the smaller elephant in the room. The funding sources that we have available for the Lakeland campus, I call this chart the color of money. And for someone who had no experience whatsoever in higher education or state government, there's been quite an education for me to understand that all money doesn't have the same color. But this is basically how that breaks down. We have varying sources of capital to do several things, as you talked about before. We have three things that we've got to do. We've got to complete the campus, we've got to build an academic mission, and we've got to provide housing and student services. Those are the three things important in the bill. And I think it's important for those who have never seen the campus or don't have an ability to reflect on how big this is. This is 150 acres. And what has to be done in that 150-acre campus is complete those roads and infrastructure, which includes drainage and utilities, and access and safety around that campus when you finish it. The Science and Technology Building, which is 160,000 square feet, you can see in this picture, looks very small compared to the 150 acres. We have to complete both of those. For those of you who have access to the book, the colors of money have gotten us to, in March of 2013, the ability to finish the building. We have always had the money to finish the building. We have always had the money to put the infrastructure in place to support that building. That has never been an issue. We are challenged with the completion of the campus, which in our view not only is part of the challenge, part of the mandate that you gave us to begin with, it's also part of the permitting process. That for those of you who are familiar with how permits are pulled, the completion of all of that infrastructure is a critical part of achieving the certificate of occupancy so that we can put our kids in that building. So that's important. The last part of that is making sure that we've got all the necessary infrastructure in that building. That the FF&E, et cetera, as well as the internet connections, which are both in the building and outside, are all matters that are very, very important to opening this building. And as a consequence, that amount of money is available to us through our E&G funding. So we have enough money, we've always had enough money to be able to deliver the requirements that were given to us. The choices that we have to make, however, have to do with the fact that we also have to do two more things. And we've got to build an academic mission, and we've also got to provide student housing. And as a consequence, when we look at our point in our history, where we are today, we have done a great deal of work, as I think you will agree, on developing our mission and costing it, but we're not finished yet. And consequently, the way the system works is that in order for us to complete the infrastructure, we've got to pledge that money so that we can let the contracts to the various contractors complete that work. And once we do that, we no longer have access to that money to be able to build out our academic missions. So we're jealous of that money. And we're careful with it. We're not going to advance it and spend it at the expense of building the academic missions that we think we have to do. So we're at a point in time to where we're reevaluating all of the costs. We're finishing as fast as we can the cost of the academic side of it, and we're doing everything we can to figure out how to use third-party capital to build the housing and the students, because that's not something that we would probably, this board would endorse, to use academic money to build those facilities. But all of those things are before this board, and you have to remember that this board was given this challenge less than 6 months ago. So we learned it, we tried to understand it, and now we're making the appropriate choices that we think the taxpayers of the state of Florida would want us to make. So with that, I believe I'm going to turn it over to Ava to talk about the other matters that you asked us to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for setting the stage. I just want to just briefly report to the board, Vice Chair Hosseini, the status of where the board is as it relates to its program development and some of the other additional plans to be put in place. Keeping in mind, Mr. Chairman, that we are preparing for the work plan meeting that is set for June. We're working through the document in the format you have set for universities, and we'll continue to work with your staff along the way on some of the recommendations that the board has made for the university. The board has decided to actually develop two colleges. That is a College of Innovation and Technology as well as a College of Engineering, and that will limit itself at this with 5 programs. The plan is to start with freshman, junior transfer, as well as master's programs. Some of the fields that the board is looking at, they're really paying attention to the chair's vision of kind of going where the ball is going, looking at cloud virtualization and big data analytics, as well as motion. These are areas that we believe that if they are represented in the system, they're not saturated, and we believe we're in a position to develop the programs in a manner differently from what they're currently presented. Some very special, I think, characteristics of the proposed programs is that they'll have real-time response to employers' needs. The vision of the board is that actually in the development of the curriculum, the programs, that we'll work very closely with industry and coming up with models and curriculum and programs that we can work with their staffs so that the university is nimble and kind of is in a position to respond very similar to how I think our state college system responds to new industry, but at a higher level. We've already been approached by different industry partners that are interested in engaging with us. They see that it is really a great opportunity to work with a brand new university in developing its programs. We've been approached about being a digital campus and about really working with us in developing advanced programs. The idea, kind of based upon the chair's slide about management, is that within each of our programs, we will incorporate leadership, finance, and management training in order to address the issue of having STEM graduates who are ready to lead. The board feels that leadership is a very big issue for us within this industry. There's a big focus on technology and engineering as a part of the whole STEM offerings. And this board has taken on this big responsibility of saying that, yes, it will be focused on jobs. They like to call itself the Jobs University, and that 75%, or the goal is to have 75% of job placement for our graduates. The faculty, we are looking at non-tenure models. We're also placing an emphasis on teaching as well as research, as well as an integrated teaching and interdisciplinary model, in that we are not building teaching silos. We think that's another interesting opportunity that we'd have, so that, for those basic English requirements, that class will know what the math class and the other upper level classes are providing. So there's an integrated model and really providing the whole student opportunity. Regarding recruitment, the idea is that we've already started partnership with STEM feeder schools. We've started conversations even with engineering charter schools, both in Florida, both in Polk County as well as in Duval County. They're very interested in working with us on creating a real pipeline for our students. We're actually also very interested, because the world is global, that we have an international aspect, and that we're targeting South America as well as the Far East. We've been actually approached by a couple of universities over in India, that's Amity University as well as Nirma University, about developing programs with them. We're interested in STEM South America and looking at that opportunity, as well as this global engineering education exchange. So we understand the world is really growing, and we think as a new technology university, it's important that we expand and that we grow with the world. We're anticipating summer programs, which is not uncommon, but think that's a great way to ensure that students are starting early, and that we have the great feeder program. And we've had great conversations with the state college system, and that what we found in our research is that there are not very many programs that allow the students with AS degrees from our state college system to actually go into engineering programs. So we're going to work very closely with our state college presidents. And additionally, we are going to work with them on developing a program so that when their students graduate with engineering technology degrees, that we can work with them and have those engineering technology degrees turn into BS degrees in engineering. Our goal is to start in 2014. We're looking at our enrollment management now, but the idea is that we'll start with 500 students, and that we will develop a very focused university. When even at full staff, we're closer to about 5,000. We think that this is a very ambitious model, but we're on track. We've developed a plan for how we will reach a SACS accreditation in the timeline as prescribed by the statute. It's a very ambitious schedule, but we're loaded and ready. We think that this is a complement to our system. When I talk to folks about Florida Poly, I say, listen, we have a great state university system. I'm probably in the best position to say that we have 11 universities that offer great programs, 10 regional universities that serve their area. We have a great state college system that's wonderful. It has great four-year degree programs that meet a need in our system. But what we're missing is the need of applied research at a higher level that can be provided at Florida Polytechnic University, one that's ready to take on the task of working with our students, producing high-tech graduates, and looking for opportunities to provide them jobs. When I say we're the Jobs University, we're fulfilling that mission and looking forward to implement it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ava. I'm sure we all have a lot of questions, so maybe I'll start, since it's either you or Rob, or you don't have to stay, you can sit if you'd like. since I wrote the letter and invited you, so maybe I'll start. I have been worried about this from the very beginning, and it's in part because I've never believed that it could be done for the amount of money that you're currently receiving on a recurring basis and that you receive to build a building. And also, I was very concerned about the recruitment of the kind of student you need for this kind of institution. It would seem to me that the kid that you need for this for Florida Poly will have the skills to get into our very best institutions. And so why go to Florida Poly if you can go to the engineering program at UCF or the engineering program at UF or FSU or, I've always considered how are you going to attract that, especially when you're unaccredited your first few years. So I'd like you to address that. And I'd also like you to address the fact that you're currently receiving, I think, 22 million recurring, 25 million recurring, 27 million recurring?
Yeah, the original was 27, then we took the 5% cut, so we were at the 22 last year.
Okay, whatever the recurring number is, and how you're going to be able to do your mission for that recurring dollar without needing additional funds that will only come from the higher education pie. If you would address those two issues for me on a going forward basis, that'd be great.
Well, I'll just add my perspective and then Abe.
Could you speak?
Yeah,
We can't hear you.
Can't hear.
Sorry. Yeah, from my perspective, this is part of the opportunity to do something different. And part of doing something different is part of the capital plan. My personal view of seeing how other institutions similar to this, particularly with industry collaboration and integration into what you're doing, provides capital. I mean, when you go to places like Arizona State, I mean, look, I can go around the country. I mean, I've been to Stanford, I've been to all these places. And as a consequence, I see how they've used third-party capital to be part of the educational delivery system. And there's no question in my mind that if we're teaching the right thing and we're producing the kinds of students and educational experience, industry is going to want to participate. The issue that industry has had generally is they can't. They haven't had the ability to do it, only in private. If you look at some of the models that we've evaluated, some of the private models have very, very strong industry, investment involvement. And when you go overseas, you'll specifically see that, with Toyota, BMW. You'll go to the German institutions and you'll see a lot of industry investment. So it presents an opportunity for us that really is not present with other state universities. Yet the bottom line is, from my standpoint, and we've discussed this privately, is I've basically assumed from day one that you weren't going to give me any more money. And if that's what you told me, I'll build a model around that. This can't be a situation where we're constantly competing, with the rest of the university system to try to ultimately build what we think we have to build, which is a fully integrated, applied STEM model. Now, relative to the students, I find that kind of interesting because I think this may surprise us. When you talk about students, at least in my view, and you look at some of the students that are now populating Stanford and Caltech, Cal Poly, and others, they're not out of high school. These people have management degrees going back to study engineering, and they're engineering students going back to study the kinds of things we talked about. Education delivery and education participation is going to be literally ubiquitous. I think what you're going to find is everybody is going to have to take continuing education if you're going to compete in the next world. And so our delivery system is going to have to accommodate not only some of the best students in Florida, but it's going to have to accommodate some of the best people who have been out in industry who are going to come back. So I wouldn't restrict it entirely in conversation to the best students. But the bottom line is it's all going to be faculty, and it's going to be delivery, and it's going to be job placement. At the end of the day, that's going to overcome what I think all of us might consider to be a challenge. But I've seen this work, and I see how it's working in other parts of the country, and we're going to find that model and make it work.
So if I can interpret what you said, you think you can do it for the amount of money you have on a going forward basis with with the amount of money you have. And as I saw from the earlier slides, you have a cash flow problem right now on building your dorm. That the statute requires you to build, because you don't want to pledge your recurring dollars, which are for, for education, for that purpose. And that may require statutory change, or, because we don't have the ability, which we did, to change that statute here in this board. And so if we need a statutory change for you to provide some assistance in terms of going out and getting funding, or you have to let us know pretty quick, because you only got a few weeks left.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I guess to answer the first question is that, we built our budget around a $27 million recurring budget that was allocated for Florida Polytechnic. And I know you've heard, when folks say 22, it's because of the cut that the system took, and that's how we got to the 22 number. And we believe that that the way we built our model and developed our budget, that yes, we can deal with the money that's been allocated to us. And because there's such an industry-driven economic development type model, I agree with the chair that we're going to be able to engage industry and that we'll continue to work with money that's been allocated. As it relates to the building of the residential housing, our position is that we have the opportunity to work with some of the dollars that we've been appropriated in order to build that out. There is some question about some flexibility to work with that. We're hoping that some of the issues that the system is working on now may work in our favor to allow us to have some flexibility to work with our allocation in order to actually build out that part of the, or at least reach that benchmark in the statute. So that's the idea. So we're working with private industry to try to come up with something that will work with them. We're hoping that some of the other issues that the industry or that the system is pushing through legislation right now will be of some assistance to us. And then if it turns out, then in our conversations with private industry to assist us with building a residential housing, that if there is some issue, then we will have to come back to you and say, and we can do that pretty quickly, and say that we were not able to actually work with private industry to get this done.
Okay. Chair,
Ms. Parker, you said that you're going to start the freshman transfer students in August of 14, 500 students.
Yes, sir.
So what do you think what percentage increase you will have by 15?
That I don't have an answer for you. We're working on enrollment planning. I think that's something I will be able to definitely answer for you in the June meeting as a part of our work plan. So I can't give you at this point the actual kind of growth pattern as it relates to what we'll definitely have by 15. What I can tell you is that we're recruiting to deal with the 500 starting this summer, and that I'm hoping then that when I come back to you in June with the work plan that we would have finished our enrollment plan, I can give you a better answer to that question.
Good.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Let me back up a minute and just tell you how, and this is just my own personal view on how to build this. We're building a business. That's the way I look at this. And as a consequence, we have the first step in building this is to get the university accredited. And we're very particular about how we start that curriculum and how we develop it and the costing of that model to get there, because once you embark on that path, you can't change it. I mean, if we decided 3 months into this that we decide to expand or contract our curriculum, you go back to go relative to the SACS accreditation. So as a consequence, we are focused entirely on the period from here to getting that accreditation. Now, the bottom line of this is we'll get accreditation. I mean, we're going to be focused on this. We're going to have the right people. We're going to have the right faculty. It's a yellow brick road that if you follow the yellow brick road, you're going to get accredited. So there's going to be a period of time prior to that accreditation where we actually get it, that we're going to be able to step back at that point, review where we are, review where the demand is, where the student supply is, how the education delivery system is working, how the capital attraction from industry is working, and we're going to be able, once we get around that accreditation, we're going to take another look at exactly where we're going and how we're going to get there. and apply the capital formation against that model. It's impossible for us, and inappropriate, quite honestly, to embark on a program 10 years from now when we haven't had a chance to take a look at how we've done during the first
Well, let me stay with the specific questions and answers because, you know, a job we have on the board are very specific that what we do and that what we need to look for and what is it that that we need to not do on our side if we have to go back and change the bill or on other things we need to do. So if we assume that we're going to start with 500 students, you know, would you think will be a 5% increase, 10% increase by another year? So I can get a feel for it. Ms. Parker?
I can't, I guess I'm sorry, Governor Hussein, that I can't give you the answer you want right now. I can tell you that where the board is headed as far as where it plans to be full-grown, that's why I gave you the number to 5,000. But as far as the percentages that you're looking for over, you know, annually, because we're in the middle of the enrollment planning process, I can't give you the answer. But as I promised, you know, because it is required as a part of our work plan, and because it's, and as I can explain to you, we just started some of the enrollment planning conversations at our strategic planning committee on Friday. So that's why I'm not in a position to give you the idea.
So let me ask you, is there a possibility for you to grow another year, double that, 500 to 1,000, or not?
I'd like to say yes. I think that this university is really geared up and ready to go, and that we have some ideas that we think are going to be exciting. However, I'd ask that you not commit me to the answer until I can complete the enrollment planning that we're engaged in right now. And if you'd like, I'll have an answer before June if you just give me a moment. I mean, so I'm sorry that I can't give you the answer.
No, I'm trying
to
you know, building a numbers now. But as you know that by August of 2006, well, end of 2016, you have to be at 1224 or something like that, right? Am I
Yes,
right?
sir.
That's the number.
Yes.
You know, that's the bill. Now, when you start at 500 students, I'm trying to build something here for the legislators to know. And because this is cost of education in Florida.
Sure.
And that's how STEM and non-STEM, one of the reasons that we have only 15% STEM in our universities in totality, there is a reason for that. STEM costs more money.
Yes, sir.
And so what happens is our universities, you know, offer other degrees, non-STEM degrees, to pay for the STEM, bottom line. They put in 400 students or 800 students in history class.
Right.
So if you look at 500 students, $25 million or $27 million, that's $50,000 a student per year.
I guess a couple of things. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr.
So
Vice Chair.
that's $50,000 a year for 500 students. And my question is the legislators, because for what we pay right now, our universities, what the state pays and what the universities can collect as a tuition, in a state that we don't like to increase our tuition, that should we have a different model for Polytech and say, if you're coming to Polytech, it's going to cost you more money. I'll give you an example. USF, they had a film school that went from Tallahassee,
FSU.
I'm sorry, FSU to Palm Beach. Now, if you're in Tallahassee, you paid $5,800. You went to Palm Beach. The cost of that degree was $18,000, and they charged the student $18,000, and they had a partner, Digital Domain, and the student had to pay $6,000 to the Digital Domain as a partner for their education. Exactly what you're talking about, in partnership with the industry. Do you see something like this to happen, that the cost to the students, you know, is going to be higher because what you're doing is STEM education versus non-STEM?
The current plan is no. And I understand the traditional model. I'm very aware of all the information that you've just shared. I can tell you that I would first ask that you keep in mind as you deal with the idea of 500 students in the current recurring budget, but it was understood that part of the carry-forward dollars will be used to help build out the campus, and that's part of the reason that we have the budget. So I ask you to keep that in mind as opposed to just, I guess, kind of multiplying it per student, understanding that we're a completely new entity. I guess the second thing is that we're very aware of the statutory requirements by when we're supposed to have over 1,000 students, and that we're marketing toward that. It's just I didn't want to just give you that answer. I wanted to give you an extended answer, and I thought I'd be able to do that once we were involved in enrollment planning. I think that as we are developing our budget at this point, it does not require a higher amount for our students. However, because we understand as a part of the work plan, we have to talk about tuition as well as any issues as it relates to how we might deal with differential tuition as the law currently stands. That again is a part of what we will address at our June board meeting. I'm sorry that the board has not gotten as far along in its planning to actually address some of your concerns now, but I will assure you, Vice Chair Hosseini, that we understand those issues and are very aware of them. And at this point, feel very confident that the investment that the state is making in Polytechnic is a good investment, and that we believe that we can work within that budget and that we can answer the questions that you have right now about how much tuition will cost. I'm just sorry that I can't give you the answer, today, but we'll be able to respond to whether we think there's a requirement that students would pay more because of the intense focus on technology and engineering.
Ms. Parker, our job is not to decide it's a good investment or bad investment. Our job is, there is a bill. We follow the law. That's it, no more, no less. My question is very specific. What I don't want to happen, for all of us, you and us, together, for all of us together, I don't want to come here on 2016 for me to report to my board as a committee and say, oh, by the way, it didn't happen. Oh, by the way, we need to have this or that. All I want is for us to ahead of time to predict this and to know that where we're going. Now, if you're suggesting by June, which will be great, so would you say by June you can get back to us and say, our prediction is so many students, our prediction is that we can go forward with the same tuition, that other universities charge, that include both STEM and non-STEM, and we can live with that. Would you be able to do that by June?
Considering that, and keeping in mind, Vice Chair Hosseini, that it was in December that I got a full board, and I understand that in June is when this board does a work plan. I'm very much aware of those guidelines and deadlines established and set with that yes, as I've said several times this morning, that by June of 2014, by the June meeting, that we'll have finished our enrollment plan and can answer those questions, and we'll also be able to answer tuition questions. I'm very well aware of the responsibility of the Board of Governors versus the responsibility of the legislature. So I think that, while you kind of hold the statute at me and said, this is your job to make sure we follow it, I agree with that.
No, that's not what I said. I said that it's not for us to decide we like it or not. It's not our job. It's not our job to decide what the legislators and the governor did. Our job is that they said, this is a bill, follow it. And our job is just to follow it. So it's not us to say we like it or not. We're over that. We are working with you, trying to get, where that you're able to comply with that. That's it.
And I appreciate...
And that's why I am working with you, trying to get us so when June comes, so we can work together to get where we need to get.
And thank you, Vice Chair Hosseini. And as I've said, yes, by June, we will be able to answer those questions because we understand what's required by the work plan.
That'd be great.
And I think that's way ahead of December 2016, which is a deadline that has been placed in the statute.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman wanted to respond to some of the questions.
Wait a second. Governor Tripp, let me see.
I have some questions, and as a member of the Select Committee, one thing, Ava, I would appreciate it if we could get at least the Select Committee kind of a monthly update of what's going on, so that if we have concerns, we can get back to you immediately about those rather than having them get down the road. If you could do that, it would be helpful. I heard it was initially reported that you were seeking a large sum of money from the legislature. Was there an idea to do that? Were you going to make a request to the legislature this time for funding? Or is that erroneous? I'm just trying to... And the reason I'm asking that, if that was true, then I assume that in your planning, you saw a need to have that money. You wouldn't be going forward to do that. And if it was true and you've backed off, what changed and what have you done to change that picture?
Well, when somebody writes a book eventually on how this Polytechnic came into play, one of the chapters they're going to write is, the education of Rob Goodell in the process. One of the very difficult things to do is we are starting a new business from scratch. We have a brand new board who had very little, if any, history with this. We had to develop a vision, then we had to develop a plan. And in that process, we had to deal with a very significant construction project. Fortunately, I've got some experience in that, so it was helpful. But we were taking all these different components and the objectives that we have to meet under the Senate bill and try to understand them. And so when we looked at this, as the chairman has appropriately framed this, a cash flow problem, one of the things that happened to us is that out of the PICO money that was given to us to build the first, the IST building, we lost 16% of that. So all of a sudden, if you were building this business, I've got a cash flow problem. So I don't have that money. So now I've got to figure out how to fill that hole, and the only place to come out and fill that hole is through E&G money. What the board was trying to understand is what choices do we have? If our only choice was to build the housing and build all the construction, and the only choice we had was E&G money, it was going to put tremendous pressure on our ability to develop a business plan and fund it for the academic mission over the next couple of years. So what we asked the COO to do, because most of the people on this board have no experience at a university level, is to explore with the Board of Governors and the legislature how we deal with some of these anomalies that we were given. Well, that amount of money happens to be $25 million. I've showed it to you. The word ask is used over here, and the next thing you know, it's in the paper. We didn't ask anyone to do anything. We were asking for help. Help us try to figure this anomaly out.
Just so we're clear, and that $25 million you were going to use to finish the infrastructure of the campus.
You have to finish the infrastructure of the campus.
And the
Or
amount
you
of
don't
money
open the building.
Okay, and the amount of money you were given did not anticipate
No.
the complete infrastructure.
I have, again, depending on, well, let's put it this way. If we got no reoccurring budget at all, we can't finish that. We don't have any reserves. So the consequence is we've always had, if someone were to say to me, you have $27 million reoccurring for 10 years, which is what the bill says, I've got plenty of money to finish that construction. I would have to use that money to do that. And that's what we'll do if that's what we have to do. It's a choice we didn't really want to make at this point until we had the academic mission costed out. And every time you look at the cost, which is to Vice Chairman Assani's point, every time you look at the cost, you go back and you revisit the delivery and redeliver the mission. We're in this circle, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing at the board level. We're very well engaged in this, and we're going to continue to do that all the way through this development. I mean, you can't take 27 million and divide it by 500 students. If you're starting up a business, no business would ever get off the ground if you do that math. You got to look at what the run rate cost of the school is going to be once it's up and going, and that's what we're doing. We're focused on what's this recurring cost to deliver this educational mission, and how much money does that really take to do that?
If I can respond, I guess
I
specifically.
have two or three other questions, so I want to...
Just so that, yeah, Governor Tripp, I'd like to say that the idea is that the carry forward dollars, I guess, I guess the word that the chair often likes to use is choices. So the idea is that the board has made a choice in that it will budget its carry forward dollars to deal with the infrastructure issue that was just clarified by the chairman. And the other thing I guess I'd like to mention, there's a lot of conversation about, I guess, where it is that this board would go. It's, it's understood that for the types of issues that we were addressing, that we would come to the Board of Governors to, address whether or not there was a need for any additional monies. What this board has done is that now is more aware of its academic programs and the costs are associated with that. We're starting small, which would leave additional carry forward dollars to deal with the infrastructure problem that the chairman has just addressed.
Okay. My second question is, when you did your presentation, and Dean, or Maury was talking about where the students are coming from, you kind of indicated that a lot of the students weren't going to be true freshman students. Sounded to me like a majority of them were going to be people coming, getting new education, things of that nature. Well, if that's the case, why do we need 190 beds for students? I know it's in the legislation, but have you thought just up front that, you know, we need to go back, probably even now, and say that's an expenditure we don't need to make today, because it sounds to me like you're struggling with where you're going to get that money from to do that, and to point out that your model says you don't need the beds. You might even be able to get a private enterprise to come in and do some funding for you, but get that going now, because, you know, to wait another year and a half, struggle with the money, and then also realize that you're not going to put the students in there anyway. Have you thought about that?
Yes, Governor Tripp, I guess we have thought about that issue, and I respond in a couple ways. Is that the board has opted to start with some freshmen, so there will be a need for some housing. Two, based upon the location of the campus, it is actually right next to I-4, and there isn't very much in that area, so the assumption is that we would need housing to accommodate those students. So in addition to the older students that we indicated in our presentation that may come to the campus or be a part of our initial model, there's a belief that there is still a need for housing, and we're looking for different ways to do that. I guess if you recall, the campus is like right there next to the Parkway, right next to I-4, and there isn't, you know, anything right in that area to actually address the housing needs. So that's why we think we need that. And again, also because we plan to start with freshmen as well.
Have you thought about the idea and reached out to private enterprise to say, you know, build a housing, we'll lease some of them, you lease some of them out, as our need grows, we can do that? I just throw that out. You know, are you talking in that way?
Yes, we are. We are having conversations with private vendors and looking at different ways that we can address the financing issue.
Okay. My third question is, we started this board with a model which really had you partnering with another university until we could make this independent. I'm not sure that that still wasn't a good idea. You know, I accept the fact that the legislature and the governor did what they did, and they had the right to do that. As we've looked down the road a little bit, I'm seeing a little struggling here. I'm not totally convinced that the presentation can be achieved, even with all the good intentions. Have you been reaching out to, first of all, any of the other universities in the system, or any private universities, to see if you can enter into some kind of partnership that can kind of guarantee that you move forward on this?
No, that has not been a part of the planning as far as a partnership, as far as a sister institution. Certainly, we have reached out to, you know, like I indicated, the State College system, and because of the relationships that I have with many of the sister institutions around the table, they've offered their assistance. But the board has developed, or is developing, a plan for a standalone polytechnic university, and we have an implementation schedule that we believe that we'll be able to follow. So while I understand, you know, certainly the advantage of having a partner, that is not the model that is being developed at this point, and the partnerships would be, you know, in a different manner, but certainly not one at this point of a kind of big sister, little sister partnership, more of, you know, siblings developing a partnership in order to get through and develop something that makes sense for the state. That's the vision for the board at this point. That's the vision that was developed, and as Governor Husseini reminded us in the statute, that's the law right now, and that's what we're following.
Okay, and my last question is, part of the statute said where feasible, you should look for shared services. Are you doing that? Are you partnering with any of the other universities on the shared services, so we're not spending money, you know, new money, when you can get those services somewhere else?
Yes, I actually am very happy to report that Chair Goodell had the the really good sense and good vision to actually enter into a partnership with the University of Florida for shared services. That agreement is working very well. When I see that as one of the triumphs of this institution. I remember years ago, while serving on the Board of Governors, there was always opportunities, or we looked for opportunities to actually enter into shared services models. I think that the way that the chair negotiated the back office services working with the University of Florida to receive that help has been very beneficial to us. I can also say that we've had very good relationships with the University of South Florida as we have kind of worked through some very tough areas as far as separating some of the issues. Dr. Genstaff and our staff has been very supportive in helping us to get there. So when it comes to shared services, I think that we're an example of how that can be a benefit to the system.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I have a comment and a question. I'll start with a comment. Looking at your circle of technology areas, there may be some that may not require immediate ABET accreditation. However, I would suggest that while you run SACS accreditation, not wait and delay the ABET for the engineering programs. You don't want a cohort out there, or more than one, that does not have the ABET accreditation. So that's something that I would suggest. Looking at your SACS accreditation timeline, I see that you are looking at commencing the SACS in March. I have not seen a faculty recruitment plan. Is that going to happen? It does take some time, maybe 6 to 8 months to recruit faculty. What is your plan for the faculty?
We have been working with Dr. Darkazali, our Vice President of Academic Affairs, and he is, as he has developed the programs, he's developed them around ideas of where he thought that he could reach to get the faculty kind of based upon his previous experience in the industry. So one of the advantages of having a Vice President of Academic Affairs who is a mechanical engineer who also has worked in different research universities as well as been a president of a previous institution is that he has the kind of relationships that someone will rely upon to actually reach out and develop our first faculty. We also have been in conversations with some of the state college in the area to see, are there areas where we can partner on some of our faculty to avoid doubling up when we have to deal with some of the same accrediting issues or some of the same courses that are required for the first 2 years generally. So right now, I think that the plan is that we've selected areas that we believe that we could recruit faculty based upon the experience of our leader, and we're also working with institutions in the area to see what we can offer or when we can partner.
Governor Beard?
Yes, I've got a couple of questions, and maybe for clarification on that, from my point of view. The building that you're building right now, how many students at its max will it handle?
Full-time, if it's part-time students, it's got to...
Well, I mean...
But you could get reasonably in there somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000.
2,000 to 3,000, so...
I think, Governor, the new model, quite honestly, which is what we hope to achieve, is to use the building, as much as we possibly can. As opposed to 9 to 5, we want to use it as much as we can. The whole issue of trying to project students, et cetera, the governor, if you will, on top of that, is really accreditation. I mean, we need to be able to execute and prove and test what we tell them we're going to do. So we're very, we're trying to be very, intelligent about that. If we get too far ahead of ourselves with too many students and too many programs, we're going to find ourselves, in difficulty with accreditation, which is the most important thing.
Certainly. I guess my question, if it's 2,000 to 3,000 that the existing facility can handle, and you're trying to get to 5 in the next, 10 years that you said, or some period of time, then that means there are new facilities needed to accommodate the 50% more students than it'll currently handle.
Again, it depends on...
Is that an assumption?
Well, it depends on what you're going to teach. In other words, if we find, a real market, and that market being determined by potential employers for, various specialties, we hope to finance it that way. We'll finance, we're going to have names on those buildings, and that's what we're going to teach in there. We'll expand to that level based on what we think we can accommodate in terms of of job placement, because that ultimately is going to be our top measure point. So my view is, we're not going to build buildings and fill it with humans unless we've got a real
Students.
purpose for it.
Sure.
Right.
Okay, well, I just assumed that once you got to the maximum amount of students that the building would accommodate, if it's 3,000, that you'd have to go build another building to handle them. Maybe you're doing it online or something.
Well, look, I think what the industry, everyone in this room has played a major part in that, is that the delivery of education that we can take advantage of, because we don't have a lot of bricks and sticks. I mean, we're starting with one building. It is absolute lunacy for us not to take advantage of the opportunities of online courses or even shared faculty at USF, UCF, all the other, at UF. That would be nonsense for us not to take advantage of that. And we don't have the cost structure issues that embed some of those issues. So, to us, it's a matter of using the facilities to best lever, our delivery of education. Most of what we're going to need in the future is less classrooms and more facilities to apply. What we can't do at this point, I can't have a combustion engine facility in there. I don't have a wind tunnel in there. Yeah. The things that are really going to be important over a long period of time are the things I'm focused on getting funded.
Right. Okay. Well,
Governor Beard, can I just answer one part of your question as well? I think that, when we've talked about the residential facility, we've looked at the hybrid model that will allow for some of the, as we plan it and we envision it, we believe that we'd have some research and there's some research labs that would be included as a part of the housing facility. So we're looking at part of our growth being handled by the next building that will include our residence hall, that we also will take care of some of our growth issues there.
for clarification, the 500 students that you're starting with, maybe I just in my simple way of thinking of things, I thought they'd be freshmen. You'd start with a freshman class and then you'd build, and the next year you'd have freshmen at Southmore's. They'd build in that kind of progression, but that's not what I heard you say. So you're going to have multiple years, you're going to have the professors there, you're going to have the classes there, not just for a freshman class, but for 2 or 3 different.
Right. And the idea, Governor Beard, is that because we are applying for accreditation, that I thought that, or the board thought it'd be great to have, to give SACS a real snapshot of the university. So the idea is that we're building a university that will take freshmen, AS and or junior transfers, as well as and provide master's level programs. So in order to go in and seek accreditation for all those levels, we need to show SACS this is what we plan on doing with the university. So the idea is that we start with all 3 levels, so that when we go in and get accredited, they have a real picture of what we're doing.
One other thing, Governor, is that in my world, I have to deal with credit rating agencies. So if the credit rating agencies say I need a fixed charge coverage of 1.35 in order to get an A rating on that bond, I'm going to deliver a 1.35 debt coverage ratio. It's the same thing here. I look at what the SACS requirements are, and one of the SACS requirements is you must graduate a class. Well, if I have to meet the requirement of the end of 16 to be accredited, and I start with freshmen, I'm at risk of achieving that goal. So as a consequence, if I graduate juniors and meet that requirement, that's how it's just backing into a logical progression.
Okay, well that clarifies it. I was trying to get to that. Let me ask one other clarification for me. I always assumed when you look at 150 acres and you've got one building sitting in the middle of it, that the ring roads and all that infrastructure that was going could be phased. That it made sense to phase it. Why put all that concrete in the ground when you're not using it all and don't need it? That's for multiple buildings down the road. But what you've told me today is that it's because of the permitting that you have to have the ring road in order to get the CO, or is it a combination of things?
No, there is a combination. Look, this would be a great conversation for you and I to have.
For you, I know.
But the fundamental issue is the way it was designed. Now let's go over to the other side and just say, look, let's just take a look at what was actually designed. It was an extraordinary, innovative design by putting in the middle basically your drainage, which are requirements, as you know, for occupancy of the building. in the middle of that park and used as a design element. I mean, it's incredibly creative. Unfortunately, you got to do it all at once. I can't phase drainage. I can't phase, that water you see in the middle of it. It's got to be done. The second thing is all the utilities from one side to the other. There's a central utility plant over here, which is where all the services are. The chillers, and et cetera. They run underneath that water or through the bridges. Well, I could phase that, but then I'm going to have to go in and dig underneath some water when you go to build the next building. It's not economically or logistically, in anybody's best interest to do that. There are things that we're going to have to postpone, there's no question, relative to landscaping and future infrastructure. We're just going to have to phase. But what I showed you was exactly what you're going to have to do, in the board's opinion, based on meeting the requirements of the building permit, meeting the requirements of just basically fundamental, construction. And I think probably the most important thing at the end is that you stop at a certain point. That is a huge site. And when you think about aesthetics, safety, appearance, if you stopped and, cut back from there, this is going to look like a building in a broken subdivision.
Well, yeah, maybe we designed it wrong or something, I don't know.
No, you
Put all that
didn't.
infrastructure in it, but...
No, look, just as I said, you tell me what's going to be in that circle 10 years from now. This university, the design of this property is unique and it's spectacular. Okay, you can sit back here and say, look, we've got all these, matters that we've got to deal with. I would tell you, 10 years from now, and you're going to look at that, somebody's going to be doing some high fives to somebody because it was very, very well thought out. It's not the design of, it's just a big project.
Okay, other governors, Governor Webster.
Okay. I just wanted to circle back again regarding the 500 students, and I guess just like Governor Baird, I just assumed that they were going to come in as a freshman class and go through the process. And you said that there are going to be varying levels. So in your projection, you feel that there will be students who are going to transfer from an accredited institution to go to an unknown?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, okay, can you explain that?
Sure.
And historically, has that happened? I'm just coming from my perspective, where I would feel a little uneasy about taking that chance.
Sure. Yeah, it's in my conversations, let's say, even within the last couple of days with someone from the state college system, when we talked about their students. And if you look at students who are graduating with an engineering technology degree, and they're limited in what they can do with that bachelor's degree, but if we work with them and they, within a short period of time, can actually have a full engineering degree, it opens up more potential for them. Particularly with the model that we're looking at, and that our students, when we have students, we will have business and industry partnerships. I feel very comfortable in saying that because we've already started those conversations. So our graduates will go right into opportunities. So a student who has an AS degree from a state college, who's taken the prerequisites for for our technology and innovation school or for engineering school, they'll see this as a great opportunity to go right into an engineering or technology program, go right into an opportunity for some type of internship with a real life experience, and graduate ready to work. And since we're working with industry on placing our graduates, you take that chance because you want to have a job when you graduate. And that's the way we're building a university, and that's how we will convince a student who is coming from an accredited school with the AS degree or coming with a 4-year engineering technology degree, that what we can do is enhance what you have. And so that's why I believe we can do that.
Governor Morton.
Thank you. Mine's more of a statement than a question. I think sometimes when we look at universities, we have to look at it from the perspective of the customer. My family, my wife, we work with a lot of children in high school. My own background right now, I'm doing a lot of work in proteomics, genomics, and pharmacogenomics, and deal a lot in science. I think your challenge is how you create the bright line between the University of Florida, FSU, USF, because those customers are going to want the kind of quality education at a cost, which the vice chair, I think, pretty well made his point. at a cost which is equal to or better than the competition, because you're in competition. You're in competition with the University of Florida and FSU, every engineering program in the state of Florida. And you're in competition for price, cost, outcome, product, quality. And what I see the infrastructure necessary to sustain this kind of a scientific, academic, mathematic, engineering, and technological approach is going to be very significant if you don't collaborate, cooperate, work with, and partner with every institution in the state of Florida. If you don't, this is going to be a real challenge.
Thank you, Governor. Any other questions, comments? Thank you all. I should start off by saying that Chair Goodell and all the trustees, you're doing yeoman's work, you're getting paid zero, and we very, very much appreciate everything you're doing. You didn't ask for this, you didn't design this, and you're doing the best you can. And so we have a job that's a little bit different than yours to make sure that that things are going as the legislature hope they would, and we're trying to figure this out. My take from this is you've got some cash flow issues. That you've got a plan that's heavily dependent on bringing in partnerships going forward into the future. You have some challenges going forward, attracting students to a brand new institution that's unaccredited. But you've got a plan. You're going forward, and we look forward to meeting with you and spending more time on this in June, where you've only been in existence for 6 months, so you've had more time to develop your work plan. So I don't know if Ava or Rob, you have anything? Chair,
I wanted to piggyback, if you'll allow me, on the work plan. What we've said to the folks with the Polytech is we're obviously going to have to, for them, based on their unusual circumstance in evolution, we'll work with them on the template of the work plan, since, as you can see, so much of what is in the current work plan depends on an up-and-going concern driven by data. So we're going to work with them on making sure that that work plan that is presented accommodates not only what the board wants, but also what they're in a position to be able to provide by way of what exists and what they vision existing in the future.
Thank you for that.
Ava, Chair, do you have anything further you need to say?
You know, my career has been, for almost 35 years, has been to go to places I've never been, make decisions, invest capital, get it back, run companies that, either had no business plan that was working or was struggling. This to me is like any other challenge I've taken on. But at the same time, the challenges that Florida is facing, Poly is a solution, not the solution. To the comments I made before, this is not going to work if we don't become a very valuable partner within the state university system. It's inconceivable that we would do anything different than that. Because if we can deliver something that's additive to the other universities, it's going to work. And if we don't, we're going to have to find how to do that. But at the end of the day, it's like any other endeavor. No great idea ever started out with overwhelming support. And this is just one of those that we're just going to have to work through.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you all being here. I think on a going forward basis, we'd love to have you here at every meeting, if you can, certainly Ava, and if you will keep our committee updated on a regular basis with your financial reports, your financial projections, and things of importance on a monthly basis. That would be helpful to us, so we stay abreast of what's going on. Okay, thank you all very much. To the full board, that's the end of our agenda. Is there anything for the good of the order? If not, thank you all very much. We'll see you at the next meeting. The meeting's adjourned.
Are we meeting in May by phone?
We haven't decided yet.